We're going to do another crossover episode. The New York Yankees, just a couple of weeks into this season, are having a very strange couple of weeks. On page, they should be losing. But in reality, they must be doing something right. I'm going to do something right with today's show because Stacey Gotsulias of Locked On Yankees is here. I'm Sully from Locked On MLB. Let's do ourselves a crossover. Hello, baseball fans. Welcome to the Locked On MLB, Locked On Yankees crossover that's dropping on the 22nd day of April 2022. I'm one of your hosts, Paul Francis Sullivan. As you look down here in my lower third, if you're watching us on the YouTubes, you can call me Sully. My illustrious co-host for today is right over there, all the way from New York.
It's like the Brady Bunch.
I know. And her name is Stacey Gotsulias. And she is the host of Locked On Yankees, the fantastic host of Locked On Yankees. And if you are just listening to Locked On Yankees, you're missing out because Stacey Gotsulias has been killing it on the YouTubes. I've known you for a couple of years now, and I've listened to your podcast before I was part of the Locked On podcast.
A couple of years? We've known each other like 10 years now, Sully.
Isn't that true?
Yeah.
You understand when I say last year, something happened
like
last year. That's
2018.
2018 happened. That was last year. God,
Yeah.
has it been?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been
2012.
We could no. There's no way we've known each other since 2012.
Yeah. On Twitter.
How old am I?
I know.
I have my hair. I'm about to turn the Big Five bagel in a couple of weeks, in less than a month. I will reach the half century mark, and so that means 1/3 of my life will be over. But Stacey Gotsulias is the host of Locked On Yankees. You got to watch her YouTube rants. They're fantastic. They're funny, and today I'm taking her to school. Literally, if you're watching on YouTube, I'm in my classroom. I'm recording this from my classroom.
You're not going to test me, are you? Because
this will all be on the quiz.
Okay.
This will all be on the quiz. Okay. The first question, trivia question I have to ask you is, what Yankee pitcher was on the mound when the Yankees clinched the 1999 American League Championship Series in Fenway Park? When they won the pennant in Fenway Park. And I'll give you a hint. He probably should have been the MVP of that series, all due respect to El Duque, because he got every huge out against the Red Sox in that series.
Oh. It's not the obvious answer, right?
It is not the obvious answer.
Is it Romero Mendoza?
It is Romero Mendoza.
Okay.
Romero Mendoza,
Yeah.
who later played on another team that I'm not allowed to mention.
We used to call him the embedded Yankee.
I know. Oh, we called him that too.
Yeah. Yeah.
He lost the last Red Sox loss that year. He was the losing pitcher. They're like, we can't use this pitcher anymore. We can't use him anymore. It will dust off Cortes. I promised I'd not bring up 2004, and I already did. And so as my penance to Stacey, I am going to sing the Yankees' praises. Because and believe me, I don't do that willfully.
No.
But I do that to show that I don't want to quite say impartial, but I'm fair.
Sure.
And if you looked up let's just be honest about a couple of things with the Yankees right now. Their offense has been spotty.
Yeah.
Has been spotty.
That's a polite term for it. Yes.
Yes. The Yankees' strategies of resting players in bizarre. Michael Kay had a huge rant about that the other day. Like the Braves had a bunch of players play 150. Why does Aaron Judge need to be rested on big games?
Yeah.
What is the point? You're seeing Joey Gallo. You look at that and say, I thought there was a universal DH. Why is this pitcher batting? Oh, wait, no. That's the left fielder.
He got a hit today.
He did get a hit.
Yeah.
But lots of, you don't have a dynamic offense as of this point.
No.
And Gerrit Cole has been
their worst starter. Yes.
Their worst starter. So if you had listed all that and the fact that they lost the series in Baltimore. A team that I don't say I'd make the 40-man roster, but I'd get an invite to spring training.
Like I said this on my show, Baltimore is not going to do much this year, but they do have good players on the team. Like there are some guys that are really good on that team. Yes. They just don't have everything together yet. Now, and you shouldn't be losing 2 out of 3 to them at any point.
You know, and Meatloaf was wrong. The 2 out of 3 was bad. That being said, they have a winning record.
Sure.
And I think no small part of that has to do with the fact, and this is absolutely, but like last year, I thought the Yankees' Achilles heel was going to be their starting pitching, and it turned out their starting pitching basically got them into the postseason.
Yeah.
And you look at this year, I was questioning some of the depth of their bullpen. Boy, was I wrong.
Yeah.
I mean, Loizaga has been shaky. Everybody else has been unbelievably effective. And I talked yesterday, and don't worry, Stacey, this is not a monologue, but I want to just set something up. I talked yesterday about the Angels, the importance of winning games you have no business winning, especially in the American League, where there's going to be about 11 teams within 5 games of each other.
Right.
And getting all those wins that you have no business winning early, that you have to make them up. The Astros winning a pair of games, or the Angels winning a pair of games in Houston without Mike Trout.
Yeah.
Is like, oh, wow, those are 2 games we have to worry about later. A great example for the Yankees was the other day where Cole looked grotesque.
It was it was one of the worst things I've ever seen.
And the bullpen threw essentially 8 shutout innings, and they won the game.
Yeah. Yep.
That is an unbelievable. They have been relying on. Now, this may come back to haunt them if they keep leaning on all these guys.
They won't.
But Clay Holmes has been tremendous.
Yeah.
Clay Holmes.
Yeah.
Miguel
he's been
Castro.
Amazing.
Miguel Castro has been great. Michael King has been great. Some guy named Clark Schmidt, who I couldn't pick out if he walked into this room right now with a shirt saying, "Hello, my name is Clark Schmidt," and he was outstanding the other day.
He was one of their big draft picks in 2017, I want to say.
Okay, fine. I'm not the...
But they drafted him after he had he was recovering from Tommy John when they drafted him, and people were like, what are they doing?
I know I've said this before. How lucky are we that it was Tommy John who had that surgery and not Win Remerschwal or a Hal Hrabrowski? You know, Tommy John. I'm getting Win Remerschwal. But so talk to us a little bit about this. How is this Yankee team winning without their stars on all cylinders? And they're playing well. We'll get into today's loss in a second, but the Yankees have been pretty good and a lot better than they are on paper.
I will blame the offense for today's loss because Jordan Montgomery pitched his ass off again, and they keep not scoring for him.
Yeah.
And this dates back to last season, so I don't know.
That's true.
Poor Jordan Montgomery and his cute little accent of his southern accent, and he's just such a sweet boy, and like talking about his outing and this and that. And, if it were me, I'd be like, these jackasses can't hit for me and it's driving me crazy. But that's why I'm not a baseball player, because I'd be in trouble. I'd be one of those baseball players that'd be like, yeah, I know it's a team sport, but could you help me out, please? Could you please get me a win maybe every once in a while? I think we should change Jordan Montgomery's name to Jacob Montgomery just for the time, because it's like watching Jacob deGrom a couple seasons ago when the Mets just could not score for him, or the bullpen would come in and give up, like 2 runs, and then the Mets would lose like 3-0, like that sort of thing.
There was a story when the Dodgers were dominating in the 60s with all through their pitching. They actually had an anemic offense. Mm-hmm. And someone had
That was like Drysdale and all those guys?
Drysdale and Koufax and Claude Osteen and all of them were amazing pitchers. And there's someone asked, I don't know what some journalist said, did you hear that Sandy Koufax threw a perfect game? And his response was, did he win?
It's true. But, the pitching will come around. Montgomery lasted 6, who's the first one to make it to 6 innings. Severino's looked good.
Nestor
He's in,
Cortes. Nestor Cortes.
he's the ace right now.
Yeah, he's unbelievable.
Yeah. And he doesn't even throw the ball hard, which is even funnier. Like he's not dialing up to 98, 97, 98, 99. He's throwing it like 91. Occasionally like a 92 will get in there, you know.
Can I ask you, like, with so much emphasis on getting flamethrowers and getting guys who come out of the bullpen throwing 100, do you think maybe that helps someone like Nestor Cortes?
I think so because it's getting to the point where you see, 97, 98 like all the time.
That's a
Like it's
changeup.
not rare anymore. Yeah, like you're seeing like, he threw a 98-mile-an-hour changeup. You're like, no, he didn't. How is that physically possible? The guys are throwing over 100 with
It's
no
not even
issues.
special. Yeah, it's not even special anymore.
It's not special anymore. If someone hits 105, that'll be special. And I think with Cortes, it's almost like, I don't want to say it's like Mo, but it's similar in which, like, I think these guys kind of know what's coming, but they still can't hit it. Something that he's doing is just working for him. And I hope we're not jinxing him right now because he's just doing really well. And it's so cool to see someone come out of nowhere and do this well and be the guy that the Yankees are, making T-shirts about. And, like he had his own T-shirt last year and his teammates were wearing it. And like they really like love this dude. And just to see him doing so well is pretty cool.
I think that's one of the lore of baseball, though, is that it's really one of the only sports where you can have someone who looks like a regular dude kind of come out of nowhere. I mean, that's the allure of Fernando Valenzuela, who I was at Dodger Stadium just last weekend, and everyone got Jackie Robinson jerseys, so there was a lot of that was the handout that they had. So, but I still think the most popular jersey in Dodger Stadium is number 34.
Yeah.
And he's he does the Spanish broadcast, and they always cut to him in the booth, and the place goes absolutely bananas.
Nuts, yeah.
And I'm convinced, he came out of nowhere, and he just looks like a guy. He just looks like a regular dude. He's got the mop of hair, a little chubby, a little round face. He looked just like a guy you would see working and just work living in your neighborhood. And he wins the Cy Young Award and throws the no-hitter and dominates. You can't see that in basketball.
Right.
There's no guy like, hey, that looks like a gym teacher. And look at that. He just scored 40 for the Knicks.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe the Knicks are a bad example for that.
Well, no, they've had guys score that much. It's just the rest
true.
of them don't score when the guys score 40. The rest of the guys will be like, 12.
You can't do that in hockey. You can't do that in football. It's really that, and it's an illusion because these guys are big, tall, specimens. But there is that lure and that someone like a Nestor Cortes could come out of nowhere and not look like a Greek god.
Yeah.
And do so with junk ball. I love it that he's doing it without being a flamethrower.
Right. Because there's so many of them now. It's like, it's
now
odd.
would be the time to develop a knuckleballer.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, we don't see them anymore.
Yeah, a knuckleball long reliever. If you're doing an opener and you start with a guy throwing 100, then you bring in a Wakefield,
The batters will be like,
we don't know what we're doing.
Yeah.
But you never experienced being a Wakefield fan because Wakefield was there from.
Can I say that as much as I hated him pitching against the Yankees, he was the one guy in the Red Sox I didn't absolutely loathe. I actually liked Tim Wakefield.
Because he was this lovable guy from Melbourne, Florida.
You never heard him speak. He just pitched.
And I'll tell you, as a Red Sox fan, there was no. How did Wakefield do last night? Okay. That you never said that.
Right.
He either threw like 9 innings where he struck out 15 and everyone looked like ridiculous, or is that beating it out of the third?
Right. Yeah.
There was no mediocre Tim Wakefield night,
Yeah.
But yeah, that was. But yeah, that'd be the time to. Now would be the time to develop a knuckler, especially with the opener situation.
Yeah.
So look at. It's obviously it's insanely early to be like looking at the standings.
Right.
But the one thing you can see as we're 1/16 of the way through the season is the National League is turning out to be what you thought it was. There are some huge teams in there, and there's some garbage teams in there. And you're seeing that the Mets and the Brewers and the Cardinals and the Giants and especially the Dodgers are kind of rising to the top,
Yep.
and some of the other teams are sinking to the bottom. And Joe Girardi's thinking, "Oh boy, we better start rising fast, or I'm going to update my LinkedIn page." But the American League is a bunch of teams that are flawed.
Right.
I mean, there are four. If the Red Sox had that finished their come from behind win today, it would have been a four-way tie for first place.
Yeah, and that's what we're expecting the AL East to be. It's
Yeah.
basically going to be those four teams and then Baltimore in the basement. And like legitimately, depending on what happens, any four of those teams could win the division.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's no clear, like the Blue Jays are a bit ahead.
I
And
think both. I think both the Blue Jays and Tampa are a notch ahead of the
Yeah.
Red Sox and Yankees, but I mean they're within two or three. All four teams are
Oh
within
yeah.
2 or 3 games of each
Oh
other.
yeah, it's going to be insane. Like September's going to be insane. It's not going to be where someone pulls away. It's going to be one of those down to the wire, not knowing who's going to win the division, who's going to do this, that, the other thing. It's going to be just up your Clonopin. I keep saying that all the time to everyone, but up whatever
Well,
drugs you need for the last month of the season because it's going to be one of those months. I can feel it.
and if two additional things happen, it could even be better. Like you see the Guardians, who we all know could pitch, but Jose Ramirez signed that contract, and I think he's already hit 50 home runs this year. I mean, it's like
Right.
put him on your fantasy team, and the other
Yeah.
players are hitting around him. Like they've been a bunch of games where they clobbered the White Sox, and we knew Houston's going to be a good team. We know Seattle was going to be a good team, but the Angels are off to a decent start, even without Trout. And if the Angels and Cleveland could be contenders as well, then
Yeah.
it's going to be an absolute free for all.
Yeah.
Absolute free for all. And you know what? I mean, for some of the teams that have like stars, this may be their chance. Like, when are we going to get a ring? Like, I know like someone like Aaron Judge just wants a ring to be part of that Yankee lore and, experience life's special moments with jewelry. And if you want to experience life's special moments with jewelry, let me recommend going to BlueNile.com. Whether it's everyday fine jewelry like cocktail rings or tennis bracelets or a beautiful wedding ring or a band, BlueNile.com has you covered. They are the original online jeweler since 1999. Right around the time Romero Mendoza closed out the 1999 American League Championship Series at Fenway Park, BlueNile.com got started helping millions of couples create their perfect engagement ring. BlueNile.com offers expert advice 24/7 with legendary service and 30-day returns. When you commit to a piece, so does Blue Nile. They have guaranteed service and repair for life and the diamond price guarantee. Contact Blue Nile to receive a competitor's diamond against one of Blue Nile's, and in most cases, they'll be matched or even beat the price. Now, let me just tell you something here and right now. This Mother's Day, give your mom, now my mom's listening to this right now. Turn away, Mom. I'm getting you your present. She's going to treasure this forever. Fine jewelry from BlueNile.com. And Locked On MLB listeners get $50 off any purchase of $500. This podcast exclusive is only good through Mother's Day. Use coupon Locked On. That's code Locked On. Plus, every order is insured, ships free, and arrives in discreet packaging that won't give away what's inside. Shop stress-free and find your forever piece. Go to BlueNile.com. Now, I know my mom's going to love her Blue Nile. But do you know what? I think, Stacey Gotsulias, if I were to give you a gift, and we're not quite at the point in our friendship where I can send you jewelry, okay?
Right.
But I could send you a Built Bar.
Oh, I would love that, especially if it was mint brownie.
Oh, yeah. And by the way, we have mentioned each other in our respective shows. You brought up the fact that I love the raspberry and you love mint brownie. Now, I happen to love mint brownie too. I just like that the tanginess of the raspberry mixed with the chocolate. And I said, but Sully, they can't all be covered 100% chocolate. I said, that's where you're wrong. They all are, including, drum roll please, the Puffs. Now, I know you've had the Puffs, Stacey Gotsulias, because you love it. Which one is your favorite of them?
I love the churro.
Yeah, I like the banana cream pie.
Yeah.
That's really good. I mean, the churro's great. Don't get me wrong. Don't get me wrong, but they're the first ever protein-infused marshmallow. They're fluffy. They're marshmallowy. They're not just a protein bar. They're great, and they're covered in 100% chocolate. Yes, the puffs are. You got low calorie, high protein. Replace your candy bars with these. They're better. Typical candy bar can be anywhere 200-300 calories. But I don't need to tell you that because you already know candy bars aren't good for you. All right? This shouldn't be a surprise. I want to take care of my body, so I'm going to have a candy bar. Forget that. Built Bars. Go to Built.com, scroll down to the macros charts. You'll be blown away. High protein, low calorie, high fiber, low carb. Most easy for you to say. Most Built Bars contain, I'm going to edit that out. Most Built Bars contain 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 grams of net carbs, and 17 grams of protein. Got great flavors, but here's the deal. They're always coming out with new ones. And anytime they think a flavor might be good, they'll make it. It'll be delicious. It'll be good for you. That's what they do. They first think about the taste, then they figure out how to make it healthy. I don't know how they do it, but they do it. So here's what you should do. Stacey, I want you to write this down because you may forget this.
Oh, okay.
Go to Built.com. Use promo code LOCKED15 and get 15% off your order. Use promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com. All right, we're here in my classroom talking about Built Bars, talking about jewelry. Means we're talking Yankee baseball with Stacey Gotsulias. Can only mean that.
Yeah.
All right, I just did about 12 or 13 minutes praising this Yankee team.
Yeah, I know.
That was not easy for me. I need a Built Bar to build up my energy after doing that. Now let's bring a little bit of the snark. We talked a little bit about how the American League is going to be absolutely a scrum.
Yeah.
So keeping that in mind and how little space there's going to be between these teams, why the hell, whether it's Boone or Cashman, or it's never Cashman. Cashman's never at fault for anything.
Oh,
He's
never.
Never. The trades were bad. Well, that was the analytics. Well, the decision was made bad. Well, that was Boone. Well, they drafted wrong. Well, that was my scouting report. But I'm in charge.
Yeah.
They tend to punt on the third game of a series. And this afternoon, we're recording this, pulling back the curtain. This afternoon, they played Thursday in Detroit. And they won the first 2 games, and they looked pretty good the first 2 games. Well, I mean, like coming back and winning the Cole start, where it looked like, oh, this is awful. That's what I mean. Like they were wins that if you're a fan, like, oh, it's my favorite type of win. I call it the dodge bullet. Like I didn't even think we had a chance, and somehow we walked away with a W. So you should feel good about that. And you had a chance to go for the sweep, and you look at the lineup, and Marwin Gonzalez?
Yeah.
I mean, who's catching? Oh, the 14th caller on WFAN? He's going to be there? And they did that all year long last year. Whenever they had a chance for a sweep,
yep,
they brought up the junior varsity team.
Yeah.
Discuss.
Drives me crazy. This is what drives me crazy. Okay. The thing that bothers me about that strategy is if they win a series 2 out of 3, but they lose the final game, it almost negates the first 2 games because that's the last thing you remember. You remember that last game. That's what sticks with you. And that's what makes the Yankee fans pissy. They're not even positive about a 2 out of 3. They're more pissed off about the loss that happened on the last day. And that's basically what happened almost the entire season last year. Anytime they had a chance for a sweep, a 3 out of 4, like they were, 3 going into the 4th game, punt. 2 going into the 3rd game, punt. I don't understand how this is still happening after what happened last year. What are you doing? You can't, when you have, okay, let me calm myself.
Okay.
No, I'm trying to gather my thoughts, actually.
Yeah.
Okay. There's not just one team that you're competing with in your division. Forget the whole AL as a whole. We're talking about the AL East. There are 4 legitimate teams, okay, that you're in, all right? So you have 3 teams that you're fighting against you're jostling for position. You can't do stuff like this. Mm-hmm. Every win is important. even in May and April and June. Like, a lot of times I'll even say it's not that big a deal, if they lose earlier in the season because they usually get on a roll. Not this team, not the way it's constructed, not the way it's been playing the last 2 years, or yeah, 2 years, 2020, 2021, and heading into this season. They never get on a roll. They're always up and down. They are never consistent, and they're just happy to squeak by and make the playoffs.
Yeah, and one of the things that you saw both in the COVID season and last year is in both years there was a big winning streak late in the season. Of course, the 2020 season there wasn't really no late or early in the season. It was just
Right.
kind of a
It
Reader's
was all late.
Digest. But like last year they went on what was it, a 17 game winning streak at one point, or 16? Remember they went on they went after
I think it was 13.
well, whatever it was, right after the Field of Dreams loss.
Yeah, and they went on a
And
roll.
then they were in extra innings. It looked like they were going to be looked like the White Sox, who were obviously a very good team last year, and they won the Field of Dreams game. And it was like, oh man, they're going to go on a wild falling apart. And this was not long after that stretch in July where there was a bunch of like really crushing bullpen losses. And then suddenly the Yankees went on a roll.
Oh, to the cheating Red Sox?
Yes.
Yeah.
And but they went on a roll, remember? And that basically got them in the postseason.
Yeah. And it really, it felt like it was going to be a good roll because of how it started, because that game, the way it was. I mean, it was a really great game, honestly. And, MLB definitely gave them the juice balls for that game. Because those balls were flying. That could have been a really,
hit one to the corn,
that could have been a really crushing, deflating loss. And then they went on this streak and you're thinking, okay, this is something. Yeah. And then they go on a different kind of streak and lose, like, what was it, 6 or 7? And it was just, they can't get consistent. And it's frustrating to watch because, we've had seasons in the past where the Yankees start off slow and then they start playing well in July and they just keep rolling. I mean, it happened in 2009 when they won that year.
It happened in 2001.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of years like where I remember in 2001, that was the first year Manny was in Boston, and the Yankees were struggling out of the gate.
Yeah.
And there's there have been a bunch. I mean, okay, 98 they were actually.
Oh yeah, the 1-4.
Yeah,
the infamous 1-4.
But then after that, they were off to a great start. But I mean, there have been a couple of years where they got off
07, not that they won the division, but going into the All-Star break, they were just around 500. They were 11-17 at one year.
05 they were at 500 in July.
Yep.
And that was the year Aaron Small and Sean Chacon
came out of nowhere. Yeah.
Saved, and they won the division that year because, and again, I'm bringing this up, the Red Sox dropped 2 out of 3 in the opening series at Yankee Stadium.
Yep.
And the two teams finished tied.
Yep.
And because the Yankees went 10-9, one game would have been the difference between playing the White Sox, who just were the worst matchup for the Red Sox. We're going to kill the Red Sox, as opposed to the Angels, who the Red Sox always took to the woodshed. I don't think the Red Sox were going to beat Chicago that year anyway. I think the White Sox were just too good a team. But that being said, it's the difference between a division title or not.
Right.
Now, bringing this back to this year, you've got to. I'm being a broken record about this, but when you're going to be really struggling for every single win to push you away from Tampa, Toronto, Boston, and we're bringing up, okay, Cleveland can hit now, so maybe Cleveland's going to be a wild card contender. Hey, look at maybe the Angels got their act together. We know Seattle is going to be a much, much better. They were a 90-win team last year, and they brought in the Cy Young Award winner. They've addressed a couple other big things. So every time you can go for the kill, especially against Detroit, they're not as bad as they were a couple of years ago. Some of their players are starting to gel, and they're starting, obviously Hinch, for whatever he did, he was still a fine manager. They're certainly improving team, and you go for the kill on that because you're going to need these wins. These are wins you're not having to fight for. And we saw let's just say, I understand sometimes you got to punt, sometimes you got to rest a player. It seems like they strategize when they're going to rest the player instead of saying this player needs rest.
Yeah. Yeah. They've been
And
doing it every game so far this season. And it's like, are you going to do this all year? Because it seems like, I don't know, it seems strange that, the lineups are going to be completely different all the time. Guys are not going to be hitting in the same spots, which some of these guys need to hit in the same spot because they like consistency and they like, they can't keep going from, oh, he's going to be batting third this day, but then we'll put him down to sixth the next day. And then, oh, we'll have Josh Donaldson lead off and then we'll have Aaron Hicks lead off. And it's like, what are you doing? And then Josh Donaldson's not playing third, although, DJ LeMahieu did a pretty good job the other night. But it's like, I don't know.
Well, you have Gleyber Torres, who they finally say, you're going to be our second baseman, except every once in a while we'll put you at short. And he can't hit this year.
No. And everyone was like, ooh, Kyle Higashioka, spring training, 7 home runs. I'm like, it's spring training. Let's see what he does going into April. And what is he doing? Nothing.
Yeah.
And who has 2 passed balls? Kyle Higashioka. Who does not? Gary Sanchez.
I'm just going to go back to this. I'm just saying this because I'm not saying this as a gloating person. I'm saying this as not understanding why they haven't seen what happened. Is last year, let's just say, like, okay, you are going to have to rest players. I'm not saying you have to be like what Don Zimmer did with the Red Sox in 1978, where he kept putting Butch Hobson to the point where he had a sub 800 fielding percentage because my favorite player, Butch Hobson's elbow was falling off, and he still was putting him at third base every day and refused to give Carlton Fisk a night off, even though he was panting. He had 2 other catchers on the roster. And we got to play my guy every day. And how'd that work out, Zimmer? I never stand that guy. But I hated Don Zimmer. Anyway, that's may he rest in peace. Son of a bitch. But on the other hand, like, let's just say 4 times last year, just 4, they went for the kill on a sweep. And let's say twice it worked.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm not even saying, every single time. I'm saying, let's say 4. I understand day game after night game. There's some, and of course Stanton, who was healthy down the stretch, and we saw down the stretch, he carried the team.
Yeah.
And he came within like a couple of feet of hitting 3 home, pulling a Reggie Jackson in the wild card game.
Yeah.
Just think if 2 times they had done that, they're playing the wild card game at home.
Yeah. Or, if they did better than 11-8 against Baltimore.
Well, I mean, that's a different stuff. They could have been. That cost them the division.
Yeah.
I mean,
it really did.
But I'm just saying, like, I'm saying just 2 additional times, and why? And you're seeing it's the same American League this year.
Yeah.
It may even be tighter.
Yeah.
As I said, because Cleveland and Anaheim might be contending as well. It may be tighter than it was last year. And last year, if the Yankees don't score on that infield hit against Tampa in the bottom of the 9th,
yeah,
Toronto is like tied. It's like it will turn like a 3-way tie.
Yeah,
and and it's going to be tighter this year. So how could you not go for the kill at least? Against Detroit this early in the season, you're not going to go in for the kill.
Yeah, and I was going to say that maybe all the injuries that they went through in 2019, even though the team in 2019 was amazing. I mean, no other team could win 103 games with as many injuries as the Yankees had to major players because all the guys they plugged in did really well. But I think they knew that would probably never happen again. And I think that Aaron Boone is kind of like, or even, the front office is giving him this direction to do this sort of thing because they're afraid of that sort of thing happening again, where they lose someone for a really long time and they know it's not going to be the same. 2019 was an outlier. That's not happening again,
Yeah. A lot of things broke right in 2019.
Yeah.
In a very surreal way. For those of you who don't remember, that was the year where Stanton played less than 20 games the whole season.
They had like
you know,
30 guys on the IL.
and yet they got guys like, Brett Gardner had a great year. Mike Talkman had a great year. I mean, like great in terms of there was no expectations for him. That was the
Exactly.
year that DJ LeMahieu, who was an afterthought when they acquired him,
He didn't
put
even
together,
start opening day.
and he was an MVP candidate by the end of the year.
Yeah.
And Sanchez homered a lot, and Urshela, again another afterthought, was like that was a really weird team.
Yeah.
And there's sometimes you see years where a team, I'll bring up the '88 Dodgers, who had a ton of injuries and had like players you don't think of as a Dodger, like Mike Shelby or John Shelby or Franklin Stubbs or
Yeah.
Alfredo Griffin. They
Right.
all are world champion Dodgers, and then you look at that Yankee team that got to um, the ALCS and won. What they said? Do 104 games that year? 103 games.
103. Yeah.
103 with like Mike Talkman.
Yeah.
You know, that was a very weird Yankee year, and I would imagine as Yankee fans go, and I'm going to bring up this question. We've talked about this on a previous podcast, but we'd like to bring it up kind of up to date. Is one of those years where you're like, they didn't win it, but God, I love that team. And I would imagine for a Yankee fan, that's got to be one of those teams that you're like, I know they didn't win the World Series. They didn't even get to the World Series because of electronic buzzers all over Jose Altuve's body. But that must have been just a beloved team for Yankee fans for what they did.
Yeah. 2017 and 2019 were the two teams that Yankee fans really, in recent years, were really, I think 2017 more bummed that they didn't make it to the World Series and then finding out what happened. It was like, great. But yeah, 2019 was a bummer the way it ended, just because of how well it went for them when it didn't go well. You know what I mean? Like they had
Yeah,
all those guys who were hurt, but then they plugged all these guys in who did really well. And they win 103 games. They make it to the ALCS, and it just felt like they were plugging along. And it was that kind of a team that could win a World Series because of everything they went through
yeah.
during the regular season, and then it just didn't happen, and that was a bummer.
Well, that team, when you looked and you saw that, like, Stanton played just like less than 24 games,
Yeah.
you would have probably bet that team was going to fall apart. Instead
Yeah.
of that would have been such a long shot if you were going to bet on them. And if you're going to bet on anyone, go to betonline.net, which is your number one source for all your betting stats and sports info. Find all of the latest sports developments, league reviews, and news, including this year's basketball playoffs and the start of the Major League Baseball season. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sports wagering information, from live betting to playoffs, esports, and more. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action. BetOnline, it's where the game starts.
Mm.
Continuing our lockdown crossover with Stacey Gotsulias. I am always curious about this, especially from fan bases that I don't adhere to.
Yeah.
I guess I'm phrasing things in a kind way.
Uh,
Um, I think about, like, growing up a Red Sox fan. There was Jerry Remy had his memorial ceremony at Fenway Park the other day, and he was our Scooter.
right.
In that, I loved Phil Rizzuto when he called Yankee games, and I love the fact that sometimes he wasn't even paying attention. It was like your quirky Italian uncle was
Yeah.
watching the game, and he sounded like a New Yorker, and he had a New York sense of humor, and it was just wonderful. And in fact, the most amazing years when he was teamed with Tom Seaver, because Tom Seaver was so funny, and he
Yeah.
knew how to push Phil's buttons at the right time. Remy was like that for Red Sox fans, in that he was a wonderful player, like Rizzuto was wonderful player, but Remy was from Fall River, and he sounded just like a guy you'd see at Dunkin' Donuts, and he
Yeah.
was funny. He had lots of stories, but then he would go on like the throwing the pizza famous moment, or when he lost a tooth in the middle of a game and he's showing it to Don Orsillo and didn't know what to do with the tooth. Um, and he played on some teams that I absolutely loved and adored, that clearly, obviously, didn't win it all. And I think about teams like the teams that he played on. My first memories of the '79 Red Sox. Thank God I was too young to remember '78. But the '88 Morgan Magic, where Joe Morgan, not that Joe Morgan, but Walpole Joe Morgan, who also was a native New Englander running the team, who used to drive a snowplow, and then he manages the Red Sox. They went on this amazing winning streak, and they won the division on the second to last day of the season. And I adored that team. And the '98 and '99 Red Sox. I loved those teams. Absolutely, it was Pedro became my favorite player of all time. They had Pedro, Nomar, and Mo for one season, one damn year. And Dan Duquette said, "Well, we can't have Mo." And then that '98 season, you talk about a revolving door. I'm convinced I played 4 games for the '99 Red Sox. If you look at the team, like their entire pitching staff from the playoffs were all acquired in August, save for Pedro. It was the weirdest team, and yet I loved that team. And of course, those teams didn't win at all. But to this day, I think about like the Brian Daubachs and the John Valentins of the world, who I just found incredibly easy to root for. And Pedro was my favorite of all time. What are some of the? You grew up in a kind of a lean time in terms of titles for the Yankees, and yet you were no less of a fan. You weren't just saying only rings. What are some of your favorite teams? Not the championship years, but some of the teams either from the '80s or some of the other Torre years, or the Showalter years, or even the Girardi years.
'85.
Mm-hmm.
They almost, they Toronto like just beat them because they won 97 games that year.
Yeah,
the Yankees.
Yeah,
they were a good team. '84 was actually fun because you had the Mattingly Winfield batting race down to the end, and I mean any team that had Don Mattingly was my favorite because I just loved him. Because my first favorite player was Greg Nettles, then Dave Righetti, then Butch Weiniger for some reason. I don't know. And then
mine was Butch Hobson. It doesn't always make sense.
Yeah, it didn't make sense at all. I loved Butch Weiniger for some reason. And then Don Mattingly came along, and it was just like, oh my God.
Yeah.
I mean, I watched baseball with my dad. And, the first 2 games we went to in '83, Mattingly, I think, was still wearing number 46 at the time, because they only just like really brought him up. And '84 was the first year that I went to a number of games, and I just I loved '84 and '85 a lot. Yeah. As for later years, I don't know, because like '99, 2000 they won, '01 they went to the World Series. I'm trying to think of those teams that if I like really liked them. I don't know. I think 2017 was like the most recent, and like since '09 really was maybe 2012, before Jeter broke his leg. The Raul game, and like that whole fighting with Baltimore down to the end. I mean, Baltimore was nipping on our heels, and that was in one of those months where I feel like this season's going to be the same, except it's going to be 3 teams down to the wire in the AL East, not just 2 fighting for position there. Yeah.
I'm going to bring up a Yankee year. I know it's dangerous for me to bring up Yankee stuff, but I remember, and I brought up the '88 Red Sox because of Morgan Magic. The '88 Yankees were a very strange team in Yankee history. It was Billy Martin's last time managing the team, and they did well under Billy. They went 40 and 28 under Billy. And then there was that, and I remember distinctly, I used to spend a lot of my summers or big chunks of my summers down in Connecticut, where I had a lot of relatives who lived there. My mother and father are both from Bridgeport, or born and raised in Bridgeport. And I remember watching at a friend of the family, the Losses, who we've known since the Cretaceous period. In June, we saw the 3 games where the Tigers, the Yankees and the Tigers at the time were like, the Yankees were up half a game on the Tigers, and the Tigers swept them. And all 3 games were walk-off wins for the Tigers. And the final game, or there was one game where I think I got to look it up here. I'm at baseballreference.com, Singler's website, and history of the planet Earth. I think one of the games was a grand slam in the bottom of the ninth with the team down. Yeah, they scored 6 runs, and the Tigers scored 6 runs in the bottom of the ninth. And the final out was a 2-out grand slam with the Tigers down 6-3. Alan Trammell hit a grand slam off of Cecilia Guante to
Oh my
win
God.
the game.
Wow.
And they wound up losing all the games, and so they went from like half a game up to a game and a half back, and they fired Billy.
Yeah.
And brought in Piniella, and the team did not do so well under Piniella, and of course that led to Piniella being fired, and eventually he wound up going to taking the Reds to the World Series. But that was a year. It was a weird year for the Yankees because they picked up Jack Clark, who they didn't need.
Right.
They had Mike Pagliarulo, was Willie Randolph's last year with the Yankees. They just had a weird, like, people you don't think of with the Yankees on that team, like Jose Cruz. But that was also the year that Claudel Washington hit a bunch of walk-off home runs.
Right. Yeah, it was really weird.
And they, like, Tommy John was still on the team. He was 45. John Candelaria was on the team. He was older than dirt. Ron Guidry made 10 starts. He was older than dirt.
Yeah.
It was just one of those weird years. But they also had famously traded Jay Buhner for Ken Phelps, as memorialized by the Seinfeld episode. And they had Hal Morris as a young player. Or what are we going to do with Hal Morris? And my favorite detail about that year was there was one game where Billy Martin activated Chris Chambliss. Chris Chambliss was on his coaching staff. Billy Martin adored Chris Chambliss, and he activated Chris Chambliss for one game. So he played one game in 1988, and he struck out. But that was just – I remember that year because they looked really good for a while, and it was a very weak AL East.
Yeah.
And then it was Steinbrenner's impulsiveness, and then that series against the Tigers broke Billy Martin.
I always say it. If Steinbrenner wasn't suspended, things wouldn't have been put into motion for the dynasty because he wasn't allowed near anything, and the Yankees were able to do what they needed to do to start the ball rolling for the dynasty.
I think there's no thing weirder for me personally in terms of Yankee fandom than the rewriting of history of George Steinbrenner's legacy.
Oh my God.
I was there in the early 90s when there was a lot of room to put your jacket here and put your hot dog there. You weren't in anyone's way.
Oh, yeah.
Were they going to move them to the Meadowlands? Were they going to move them to?
Were they going to build a West Side Stadium? By
by the
rail
Javits
yards?
Center. The Javits Center. They were going to put a baseball stadium there. Like that would where?
Yeah.
And the chant when I used to go when I was at NYU and there was a lot of empty seats in the Bronx. The chant was "George must go. George must go."
Oh yeah. I'm pretty sure I chanted that myself.
I'm sure. I think I remember you there.
Yeah.
But when you think about when the Bronx Zoo was put together, and he gets all the credit for, and to be fair, he was aggressive to bring in Catfish Hunter, and he was aggressive to bring in Jackson, he was aggressive to bring in Gossage. All to be fair, but that team was put together by Gabe Paul, by ransacking the Indians, and stealing Greg Nettles, stealing Chris Chambliss, stealing Tidrow, flipping Bobby Mercer for Bobby Bonds, and then flipping Bobby Bonds for Ed Figueroa and Mickey Rivers.
Right.
I mean, like every trade that Gabe Paul made worked out. Like he traded for Doc Ellis, who gave him one good year, then flipped Doc Ellis to bring in Mike Torres, who gave him a good year. I'm like, everything he did worked with that team, and he didn't trade away Ron Guidry, who Steinbrenner wanted to trade away. He traded in the first Doc Ellis trade, they threw in a young infielder named Willie Randolph. They flipped for Oscar Gamble, then flipped Oscar Gamble for Bucky Dent. Like everything Gabe Paul did was great, and all anyone remembers was Steinbrenner signed Reggie.
Right. Right.
And then when he was in, Gabe Paul left, and then it worked one time switching the manager in midstream in '78
Yeah.
with Bob Lemon.
Right.
And Steimer said, "Oh, that's what I got to do."
Yeah. Yeah.
And Rudy May, who was a guest on the show many years ago, said that when he was with the Yankees in the '80s, he was part of the '81 team, and he was
Right.
also with the Yankees in the mid '70s. And then he got traded away, got bounced around. They came back. He said that he used to, in the mid '80s, he would come into the clubhouse and he would turn to the clubhouse attendant and say, "Who's our manager today?"
It's true.
And then he traded away Willie McGee. He traded away Fred McGriff. Obviously traded away Buhner, traded away Doug Drabeck, traded away Jose Rio. All these people who would have been like, "Oh God, we desperately need pitching. I wonder if we could use Jose Rio and Doug Drabeck. We desperately need a shortstop. We could use Greg Gagne or Jose Uribe. We could use a great, imagine having Willie McGee in his prime in a lineup with Don Mattingly and Dave Winfield."
Right.
I mean, Willie McGee was the MVP of the freaking National League, and he was dealt for Bob Sykes, who played as many games with the Yankees as I did. And so you look at this lost dynasty, and then then after that year, I won't mention, involving the Diamondbacks, when Steinbrenner really kind of like, there's going to be some changes around here. They couldn't win again for a period of time, and they made a bunch of I don't know. Like I'm always blown away that the two great streaks that Steinbrenner have are all talked about the players that he signed, and like Gene Michael and Buck Showalter put together the core.
Yeah.
It was them. He was suspended.
Yeah.
He wanted
Thank
to trade.
God.
He wanted to trade Derek Jeter for Brian Harvey.
Yeah. Like, thank God. Thank you. Thank you. What was the guy's name that got him in trouble?
Oh, Howie Spira.
Spira. Yeah.
Yeah, Howie Spira.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Thank you
I
for
didn't have
making
to
my
look that
20s.
up.
Thank you for making my 20s a really fun time, because my childhood, not that it was rough. I mean, I went to Yankee Stadium a lot in the 80s, and they won a lot when I was there. They just didn't make the playoffs.
They were a fun team. They just couldn't pitch.
Yeah.
They couldn't pitch. And then while the Yankees were floundering in 1990 with a horrible pitching staff, the NLCS had the two aces, Jose Rio and Doug Drabeck. And Hal Morris was hitting the snot out of the ball for the Reds.
Yeah.
And Willie McGee won the batting title. I mean, all these different things. Anyway, well, look, we've been talking a lot, and I knew it was going to be like this.
Yeah.
But that's what happens, as apparently we've known each other over a decade.
Yeah. It's been a decade.
It's been a decade. Holy Toledo. Holy Phil Esposito. Well, Stacey Gotsulias is the host of and sometimes co-host, sometimes solo host of the absolutely fabulous Locked On Yankees, which I subscribe to and listen to. And I don't just listen to the games after a Yankee loss. I listen to all the episodes. But you should follow Stacey on YouTube, because not only do you get the great rants, but you also get some outstanding eyebrow work and we both have.
I can only do one.
I can do both.
Yeah, I can't do both. Only my right one.
Yeah, I can do both. I could do this one naturally, and then I developed the other one. And that was just watching Belushi, who was one of my comedic heroes. Well, Stacey, where can people follow your fantastic podcast?
You can follow my podcast. Let's see. We're on Instagram and Twitter at Locked On Yankees, all one word. You can find us on every podcasting platform available. There seem to be new ones popping up every day.
I know.
And, if you feel so inclined, you can follow me on Twitter at Stacegots, STACEGOTS.
Right there.
I tweet about baseball. I tweet about 80s music, and I put up a lot of pictures of my cats. So if you're into that.
By the way, follow Stacey on Twitter for great baseball stuff, but also during the off season, you will go on these tangents of posting whatever the American Top 40 was for that particular weekend.
Yeah.
And from like, okay, this is what it was in 81 or 82 or 84, whatever it was. And when you hit one of those years when I was following it and listening to WHTT in Boston, and listening to like, oh my God, I like, there's sometimes like, I can't believe there's a brain synapse that I have that still remembers that song. So that's some of my, for nostalgic purposes.
Yeah.
There you go. You follow our show at Lockdown MLB Pods on both Twitter and Instagram. I'm your pal Sully. I'm at Sully Baseball on Twitter and Sully Baseball Podcast on Instagram. Well, talking for a long time. I may have to split this in two.
Yeah.
The video will be one. If you listen on audio, I'm going to split this in two on audio. This has been Locked On MLB crossover with Locked On Yankees. I'm your host, Paul Francis Sullivan. Please call me Sully.